Hello and welcome to Getting Naked with Happiness with me, Stephen Liu. Each episode, my guests will share personal stories of resilience and bear their emotions and minds openly. Learn from the wisdoms that they have gained through their journeys and create your very own well-being toolkit. Today, we have a very special guest, and her name is Lisa Edwards. I met Lisa back in London a few months ago, and after meeting her, I knew that immediately that I have to get her on my show. And today she's here, and please join me to welcome Lisa to the show. Hi, Lisa.
Hi, Stephen. Hi, how are you?
Good to see you. And Lisa, I know that you are a master practitioner of hypnotherapy, a timeline therapy and coach, and also an inspirational speaker and a self-love coach. For those people
That's
who are listening who are not familiar with these terms, maybe could you share about what do you do?
well, I help people overcome their limiting beliefs, move forward in their lives, learn to feel worthy and deserving. Anything that's holding them back, whether it's a new limiting belief or something that stems perhaps is something more deeper rooted, perhaps in childhood. It's really about sort of getting rid of those negative emotions, limiting beliefs, and helping them move forward in the direction that they want to go in. Really. Um,
Hmm.
with a sort of a real emphasis on self-love, and feeling worthy and deserving of happiness and moving forward.
Wow.
Um,
Self-love is such a big topic, isn't it? Isn't it? It has a big impact on confidence, self-worth, self-respect, and the way they have these narratives of themselves and how the way they feel about themselves. And
yeah.
maybe could you share a bit more on this? Or could you share a bit more of how do you help people to develop their self-worth or to overcome their limiting beliefs?
So for me, the fundamental sort of key to success and happiness is feeling that you absolutely deserve it, and feel, because without feeling that you deserve it, it's kind of a little bit like trying to fly a kite when there's no wind. You can run as fast and as hard as you like, and you may just get it up in the air, but how long is it actually going to last? It's just going to come crashing down. So my is really about stripping it back, because we often we hear of coaches talking about challenging yourself and going out and doing these things and finding your purpose. But for me, it's really about actually stripping it right back and getting the basics right and actually feeling whether or not you deserve it and whether you feel self-worth, really. Because like I said, anything else, it has a knock-on effect on almost every aspect of your life. um, and I do this with things such as timeline therapy, which helps to go back to that point of when you had this limiting belief and when you decided, and it is a decision, you decide for yourself at some point in your life, whether it's after a traumatic event or from childhood, to release that and to learn from it in a state of kind of not hypnosis, but in a sort of very relaxed way where you can actually learn from it and then move forward, taking those learnings through. So it's a technique, it's in timeline therapy that I mainly use for that,
Hmm.
amongst other things.
Fascinating. Talking about stripping, talking about the topic on stripping, and let's say, if I direct the question back to you, what did you have to strip from your life to become happier or happy? Could you share something, like what was a life like before becoming a self-love coach and therapist?
So for me, my journey was actually a 6-year relationship with my ex-partner. It started, the story sort of starts in the summer of 2014, and I came home to quite some disturbing news from my partner at the time. I mean, he was late home from work, and we were having this argument about him being late. Well, I was arguing with him, really. He wasn't saying very much. And at some point, he just put his head in his hands and he said, they found a tumor, they found a growth. And at that point, he was 34, and it was, you know, there he was, he'd had a brain tumor, and it was, we'd been together for 6 years. We were planning on getting married. He was this amazing person. Everybody really liked him. And in a moment, going from thinking about planning a wedding, I was thinking about planning a funeral. And so whilst I was supporting him through this, uh, a couple of weeks afterwards, he assaulted me. I was in the bath, and he came in, and he just put his hands down between my legs, quite aggressively, and I thought that was very out of character. And when I got out of the bath, he was in the bedroom waiting for me, and he attacked me, and it was something completely shocking. Um, and whilst I was trying to fight him off and defend myself, he, um, I remember I was thinking in my head, I couldn't hit his face, I couldn't hurt him, because if I pushed him too hard, I might he might knock his head, and that might make the brain tumor worse or something.
Yeah.
And so all this time, that whilst he was attacking me, ironically, I was actually thinking about his welfare.
Yeah.
And of course, I was shocked, I upset, I confused. I sent him away. I told him to get out. But within about 2 days, or even a day maybe, he came back, and he was saying to me that he was so scared, he was alone, he didn't have anybody, he had this thing growing in his head, and he needed my support. And so I agreed. I thought, I'm compassionate. I had to take him back. He didn't have anybody, and I just made excuses, really, that it was because it may have affected his cognitive functioning, this brain tumor, and how do you know how you're going to react. But things were just not right. Over the sort of coming weeks, it was like I couldn't get to any of the appointments, hospital appointments, because he was either getting confused with the times or changing the times, the days. And I I started looking then for an appointment letter, because his behaviour was becoming quite erratic, and I couldn't find anything. But what I did find was a second phone of his that I'd never seen before. And I was sort of standing in the bedroom holding this phone, and I had this horrible sense of dread that I knew that something was very wrong. And I remember I turned it on, and the first thing I saw was a picture of a baby and a message saying, do you want to meet your daughter, or do you want to do a DNA test? And I felt sick to my stomach, because I saw this picture and I knew I knew that it was his, because it looks exactly like him. And it was kind of like, over the coming weeks, over the coming days, it took me about 2 weeks, really, to get the full truth, and probably I never really got the full truth, and probably to this day I still don't have the full truth. But what became apparent was that the whole 6 years of our relationship had been a complete lie. Um, he didn't just have an affair whilst we were together; he was married. So from the beginning, he was leading a double life. Um, he'd had an affair with this woman. He'd given her a false name and disappeared when she got pregnant. And even his place of work, that he'd been for the last year that we were together, had been a complete lie. He'd actually faked Facebook accounts of colleagues that didn't actually exist, that had been contacted, giving support about the brain tumor, and he'd used them to sort of corroborate his story, really, and to convince me. Amongst other things, I mean, this is really just the tip of the iceberg, and it completely sent my world upside down. I felt like I was at the bottom. I don't know if when you were a kid, you used to do like somersaults in the swimming pool if you go swimming,
Yeah.
and sometimes you get sort of disorientated and it might go a bit wrong, and you can't get back to the surface because you kind of turn to one side. And it felt like that. I was lying like at the bottom of a pool or the ocean, not able to reach the surface. The sensation of anxiety and not being able to breathe was so overwhelming, because it's something that you don't know how to deal with. It's something that you can't comprehend, that your partner, your loving partner, who you slept with for 6 years, taken care of, thought that loved you, had been abusing you in a way, mentally abusing you, physically abusing you. Um, and that you'd not seen it. You'd not seen any signs. So
Wow.
this for me was just yeah, very much wow. I mean, there were many other things. In fact, one of his Facebook colleagues that he'd created had actually been trolling me and abusing me online as well. She'd actually been sending me some quite explicit messages about how I was old and ugly and he could do better, and how she wanted him for us, and she could get him easily. And it turned out that this abusing woman who'd been sort of, um, sending all these horrific messages was actually him as well. The fact
Oh,
that for absolutely no reason he'd been, um, I don't, clearly he had some sort of mental issues or something that was going on, because his behavior was just so shocking. um, so incredible. I did go to the, I mean, I was hysterical afterwards, actually. I ran to the police, but they couldn't really do anything. A lot of it was historic, and he hadn't physically hit me, so therefore, you know, I was pretty much just, in fact, they looked at me as if they didn't really believe me. It was kind of like an eyebrow raise, and
mm,
you know, um, and because of the shame and the humiliation, I did tell people, but it's not something you can really. I didn't really want to talk about it. Um, And I think that I almost dismissed it and really didn't actually deal with my healing, um, in a way that perhaps that I know that I should have done. With hindsight, looking back, um, and I just sort of carried on. I'm British, I'm fine, everything's going to be okay. That sort of
yeah.
British mentality of, that's it, just get on with it. And I also come from a family of, we're from the north of England, and it's sort of working class,
Mm,
sort of hardy characters. You just get on with it, and so that was my approach. I just got on with it, and I this sort of happened. I think it started in the summer and came to a conclusion, I think, in October, when I found the the phone. And I think Christmas Day. I remember Christmas Day was horrendous. It was my son had gone with his father, and I was alone. I remember I was invited. My family wanted me there, and I told my brother I was going to my sister's, and I told my sister I was going to my brother's, because I didn't want anybody. Because I couldn't cope with seeing anybody or being around anybody. Um, but I got through those really dark days, I think, with music. Um, I just had my headphones on
yeah.
almost continuously. I found my power music that sort of just got me through the day, if you like. Got me up, got me through the day.
Yeah.
Um,
Can I go back to what was the pivoting point that you realized that you broke free from him?
well, I think before I really began the healing, what happened was, as I said before, I didn't really deal with it at the time. I mean, my method was, I use music, and I suppose you can say that music is therapy in a way. But I used the music just to get me through the day, because I had a son, I had to get up, I had to work. Um, but really, what happened was, I felt like I was getting better. I was moving forward. What I was doing was, I had this dream. I had a 10-year dream that I wanted to go to do the Inca Trail in Machu Picchu. And so I started booking things and doing things, going to events, going to, like, I joined some meetup groups, and and obviously that you have to get fit for it as well. So I joined lots of hiking groups, and I felt, in a way, I was getting better, um, and moving forward. And I met a new guy, this new relationship, and it was amazing. This really wonderful guy. Everything felt like it was moving in the right direction, and it was wonderful. Uh, and I remember I told him, eventually, as things started to go, I did tell him what had happened. And I said to him, and it's really quite indicative of my own state of mind, was I said to him, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that you've got me. I'm sorry that you are the next relationship after that one. And he just sort of, he laughed, and he said, I'm glad that I'm the next relationship, which was very sweet of him. But the fact that I had to apologize is kind of indicative of my state of mind. And he did me a real kindness, actually, because after 16 months together, he actually walked away. And he walked away because I'd actually, as I said before, I had not really done any kind of healing. I'd gone into that relationship with a mindset of this helpless victim. Poor me, somebody's done something to me, I need healing, you can prove to me that, some men are good, kind of thing. And by walking away, he actually inadvertently taught me about self-love, in the fact that he had boundaries. So part of having self-worth and self-love is having boundaries, and having and knowing when to say no. And him walking away, even though he cared about me, and it wasn't to do with feelings, because when we did split up, he was holding me and hugging me, and it was the most emotional, and it always gets me. It was the most emotional moment because I knew that it was right. I knew that, he was, again, that I had to learn something. I was learning something there. And I knew that I had to start taking responsibility for my own mental well-being that I had not done, really. I mean, I had done some things, okay. I was, had planned on going to Machu Picchu and things like that, but I'd not really addressed these sort of feelings of guilt and shame and distrust and all that sort of blame. And I was full of hate and bitterness, um, and him walking away was kind of almost like a penny dropping, really, then, that I needed to get help. I mean, I became really ill afterwards, actually, and I did feel like an absolute failure initially. Like that was it. I was destined to be alone. I was a failure in relationship. I was a useless human being. And I became ill to the point that I ended up being in hospital. I lost so much weight. I was in constant pain every day. I felt I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep. And I remember when I was finally discharged from the hospital, and they said, after being poked and prodded and having all these tests, and they said to me, "There's nothing wrong with physiologically, there's nothing wrong with you. It's stress." And I think at that point I was, right, I really need to get my head together now. I really need to, for my sake of my health and my son. And that's when I started on my journey, if you like, to training. I initially started doing workshops because I read about NLP. I've known about NLP for quite a while, and I thought, right, this is an opportunity. I'm going to go and start actively doing things to actually change my behaviors and my thoughts, and take some control. And I started doing workshops, and then from there I began training, and I did, a practitioner course of NLP. And I loved it so much that I sort of continued, and then I actually trained up, in hypnotherapy as well, and timeline therapy. And through the course of the actual training, obviously we're practicing on each other, and obviously I ended up having my own kind of therapy, if you like. It was very therapeutic and cathartic as well. And there was one moment, I mean, obviously I had this a great, incredible mentor, and I think one time I sort of met up with him, and I was ranting about, all my woes and everything else, and how I couldn't get through this and I couldn't get through that. And he just sat there, and he was just listening to me, and he didn't say anything. And at one point he just leaned over to me, and he put a packet of tissues on the table, and he said, "I'm so sorry, Lisa, but why do you hate yourself? Why do you hate yourself so much?" And again, this is it's quite emotional, because it was, again, like a real cathartic, almost an aha moment. And in that moment, as I was crying and crying, I suddenly realized that whilst I'd been blaming and projecting all this anger and hate and all this blame towards my ex or anything else that happened in my life previously and in my childhood and things, um, that I realized it was myself. I had an issue with myself. I felt undeserving and unworthy, and it stemmed way back before Brain Tumor Man. It stemmed way, into my childhood, because my childhood was, I grew up in a very strict, you could call cult-like religion, where everything was controlled.
Was it like
Daily
you? Was it like just like you or your whole family? Whole family?
Yeah, it was my whole family. Yeah, it was
Okay.
something I was born into, even my extended family. And it was, this whole, if you don't worship, it was very much, if you don't worship God, if you don't follow this pathway, if you don't think the right thoughts, you're going to die. You will be wiped off the earth and you will die. And it was very much a fearful. There was constant emphasis on we're sinners. You couldn't think about. Um, like God was always there in your thoughts and knowing how you were thinking. So it was this constant feeling of fear and unworthiness, I guess. This constant. Uh, it was a horrible sense of. I remember, and that there was demons, and if we ever. If you did anything such as meditation or hypnosis, that was the work of the devil, and he would infiltrate your mind. And if you had bad thoughts, then the devil was there infiltrating your mind. And for me, I'm not. Don't get me wrong. If you believe in God, and that's absolutely fine. I respect everybody's beliefs. This is just a personal how I felt, and how it affected me growing up. Yeah, I saw a lot of hypocrisy as well. My family. My father was very violent towards my mother, and then my mother ended up in a new relationship, and he was also equally violent to her, and he was violent to myself. In fact, one time when I intervened, he was beating her up, and I intervened and stepped in. I also got a beating, and I was 15. And even before that, we would have. Um, they sort of believed in corporal punishment, if you like. I was whipped at the age of 12 after having the Bible read to me. We had to attend 5 meetings a week. You were expected to go out and preach to other people, and if you like, recruit other people. And you had to sort of submit how many hours you did. So, it was, and you couldn't associate with people outside of work and school, with anybody who wasn't part of your religion. The sort of belief was that this system of things was going to end very soon, and there was no reason to have a career, or to do it, to sort of focus in this world, because there was going to be a better one. It was going to be wiped out. Everything was going to be destroyed, and only those believers or worshippers of God, this who followed this particular pathway, would survive. So it was a life of fear, really, fear and a sense of not being
Wow.
particularly worthy. Yeah. So I think, obviously um, I turned my back on it when I was 18, because I was sort of brought up in it. Um, I saw too much hypocrisy.
Yeah.
It didn't make me a better. I mean, if it makes you a better person, any religion, if it makes you a better person, it gives you hope and faith, that's absolutely fine. But it was not that for me at all. Um,
Well, it took a lot of courage for you to leave at 18 years old, right? At the
yeah, because I
point.
had nobody, you know, all my friends, everything I'd ever known. I had nobody outside of that
Community.
community, if you
Okay.
like. Yeah, it was a community, I suppose. I can't say it was an easy decision, and I think I was shaking for a few days afterwards, waiting for something terrible to happen to me. Um, and so, yeah, so I just went off an adventure, and I turned it around. I think you can turn things, you can spin things around, you can reframe things, you can see it as an opportunity. And I think, naturally I just saw an opportunity, and some people could say it was running away. I say, well, it was an amazing opportunity that I took.
Yeah.
Um, and so there's always ways that there's always different perspectives and ways of looking at things. And that, yeah, that's what I did. I think in a way, good it happened, good, because it taught me many things.
Wow,
Um,
it's a huge story of resilience of like how you started out since you were young and you overcame all these adversities family issues and struggles, and you reinvented yourself at the age of 18, and
Yeah.
you went out of a comfort zone. You had to do something crazy, to escape a life of suffering. And that's amazing and admirable. And I was just wondering, because when you met, as you call it, the brain tumor guy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a bit sticky though.
It's a very worthy name, yeah. The lying brain tumor man, yeah.
Yeah, and it seems to me that he was a sociopath, um, and he went in great length to carve out a double life to own you, to entrap you. And I was just it struck me in a way that you were living in a codependent relationship. I don't know. So do you think that there was some sort of in your journey of love and healing that 6 years relationship helped you to progress and break away some of the traumas that you were facing that you were younger? I know that this is a long stretch here, but I'm just thinking that there might be some sort of similarity between the family that you were brought up in and with the relationship with the brain tumor guy.
A lot of people ask me, how did I not know? I think the first question is how people find it quite unbelievable to figure out how I did not see the signs. 6 years, the man was leading not only a double but triple life. Um, and I think that maybe there were the signs, but I don't know if I felt that I deserved better than him. Like, I didn't think that I thought he was the best that I was going to get, possibly. This is all sort of subconsciously, because it's not something we sit there and consciously think about. It's a we operate mostly in the subconscious, don't we? Depending on our limiting beliefs. And so there is an element that I think that my unworthiness, perhaps I attracted the wrong person, because obviously we project outwards. So perhaps I didn't feel, I felt maybe grateful to be with him in a way. There is possibly that element as well. It's quite difficult because there are so many, for me, I think that in my life, because of my childhood, I've and the feeling of unworthiness which has stuck, no matter what I've done. Even though I went off on these adventures and I've achieved great success, don't get me wrong, it doesn't stop you from achieving success. Like I said about the analogy with the kite, if you run hard enough and fast enough, you can get something up in the air. You can get a kite up in the air if you run hard and fast. It's just not going to stay there, you
Hmm.
know without the wind. um, and so I think that's what I found in my life, is that I've achieved success. I've just not been able to maintain it. I've either unconsciously sabotaged something that was good, or in this case with him, perhaps attracted something negative because it matched my own beliefs of feeling
Hmm.
unworthy. Um, so I think in that respect, I think there were a lot of issues within the relationship that obviously I can look back and I can connect the dots now. At the time, they were isolated incidents, but I tend to overlook them and dismiss them. Perhaps because I felt like he was the best thing I was going to get. He did treat me. Everybody liked him. On the face of it, he was a nice guy. He never said anything bad to me or disrespectful until the end, and then it all sort of came out. Um, so he treated me, I truly believed he'd loved me. But again, perhaps my own feelings of unworthiness affected, I projected outwards and I saw something completely different, because we see what reflects our beliefs, don't we? And so that's possibly the connection, really.
How will you advise those who are stuck in a dysfunctional relationship? Do you have any sort of thoughts or opinions to how do we nudge them to gain back their self-love? Yes.
I think this can be a very, very difficult. It's very difficult when somebody's involved in that situation, because I know somebody very close to me who's also had been in a very difficult relationship, and he was quite manipulative. and it was very difficult to get her away. It's very difficult sometimes to leave a relationship when you're being victimized, because you start to believe all those things that they're telling you. Perhaps, you are being told that you're worthless or you can't live without that person, and over time you start to believe them. And so it can be very difficult to get somebody to sort of, make that decision to leave. My only advice, is quite difficult, obviously. Each situation is very different and unique, and it's quite hard to give blanket advice. I would say is really reach out. There are quite a lot of charities, or reach out to somebody who's perhaps been in this similar situation. There's lots of if you want to do something anonymously. Sometimes you can't talk to your family and friends because maybe they've, quite often, situations where there's an abuser, and it's quite different. Sometimes you end up with families that actually stop speaking because they take them away from the family, then they become isolated. And in that situation, I would say try and reach out to any organizations that can help, um, that you can even find online and things like that, who can support you and sort of give you step by step, you know uh, counseling and things like that, that you can do to sort of build up that strength, to realize that you actually deserve much better. um, you definitely deserve much better. So that would be my advice, is to reach out, to try and get some kind of support and help, because sometimes it's very difficult to do this alone. So you really need support and help, um, and get some, like I said, you can get help anonymously as well, with charities or organizations. There's many domestic abuse charities and things, or a supportive friend, if you trust, if you're still in contact with your friends.
Yeah, I think social support is really important,
Absolutely.
and also the right social support, because sometimes when during a time of crisis, when one is feeling confused or hurt, when they reach out, I think they need to filter their social support, because I have seen or heard cases or stories of when one is stuck in a dysfunctional relationship. There's this lady that I was working with, and she reached out for help, and because she belongs to a certain community, and her friends asked her to stay on and suck it up for the kid and the child.
Well, right.
Yeah. So I think we also need to, yeah, seeking for social support is good, but we also need to have different opinions. And
Absolutely.
yeah, so I like the part how you said you could seek out for help anonymously. That's important. Yeah,
Yeah.
sometimes friends could be a bit biased. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And because also what you're going to do is reach out. You're going to have people who've got professional, experience, and quite often a lot of these organisations are actually run by women, or men as well, because men get abused. Um, that have actually been through it themselves and understand. So so knowing that you're not alone, you are not
Mm.
alone, is also quite important, because often we feel isolated and alone, nowhere to turn. But you can there is, you know there is always somewhere if you need to go and have counselling. Again, if you're confined to you're scared to go out and things, then look online for some support, and they can probably give you an action plan of where to go, or somewhere, a safe house, somewhere to go, quite often. Particularly with domestic violence and things like that, there may be in your local area an actual charity that has, a proper, a safe house or somewhere for you to go, a refuge, if you
Mm.
like. Um,
Talking about support and safety, and I note that now you're a hypnotherapist and a self-love coach. You teach your clients to rewrite their narratives and their stories
yeah,
by changing their inner dialogue, right?
yeah.
And if you could offer an advice to those people who are suffering, how will you encourage them to change their narrative? What will you say to them?
Change the narrative. Well, I would say, first, I mean, it depends. Again, it depends on what sort of stage of suffering. It's very difficult to give blanket advice, because obviously I deal with one to one, and I depends on where they are in their journey. Um, Again, I would say, first of all, know that you're not alone. You know, Suffering, we've all suffered at some point or other. It's kind of, I think it's, Dr. Viktor Frankl, I think, who said that, you know, suffering is part of the human condition as being born and dying. So know that you're not alone, and there's always help out there. In terms of the inner narrative, I mean, there are things that you can do on a daily basis, which requires conscious effort. The things that you can consciously do, and a lot of it is repetition, repetition, repetition. Um, you know, if you think about, if you're learning to drive a car, you get and you think, oh, you know, I can't drive it. You've gone from being a non-car driver to being a car driver, but it doesn't happen overnight. It's constant repetition. At first you think, oh no, I can't do this, or too many processes, too many things to deal with, oh, you know, mirror signal maneuver, oh, changing it, you know, it's an absolute no. You think you're never going to get it. And after repetition, 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 and practicing and practicing, you know, you can do it on automatic pilot then, can't you, eventually? And so repetition is quite key. And one way you can change your narrative is affirmations, which is, you know, something that you straight away in the morning, you should put them up, write some affirmations, put them somewhere you're going to see them first thing in the morning, and say them. But there's a particular way that I encourage my clients and anybody else to say them is, for example, if you're feeling, let's say you need confidence or something, and you're not particularly confident, or you have social anxiety, just to say, I am confident, may be dismissed. As a hypnotherapist, you probably know that suggestion, we want people to accept suggestions. As a suggestion, it's probably going to be dismissed immediately, because if you're not particularly confident, you're going to say, well, that's rubbish, you know, I'm not confident, and that you're going to dismiss it straight away. Whereas if you write your affirmations, or you say your affirmations in a way such as, I am becoming more confident each and every day, that's more, it's more believable, and therefore you're more likely to accept it. I am becoming a bit more confident each and every day. So there is a way to say affirmations, and which is, you know, which makes it more accepted by your unconscious. And so you can do things like that, affirmations. Obviously, this is not just, you know, if you've gone through quite a traumatic event, you might need to see, you know, you might need to go and have healing, counselling, therapy, or something like that. So something to change a narrative is definitely, your conscious narrative is affirmations, because it keeps in mind, then you start the day with the right kind of thoughts, and then you can change, you know, and if you continuously repeat those throughout the day and in the evening, you know, that's one way of starting. But again, it's going to take a while. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. Another way is through hypnosis, which obviously is going to cut the middleman out, if you like, you know, your conscious, and get straight to the unconscious. Um, and you can actually do self-hypnosis, which essentially is just letting your imagination, you know, using your imagination in a deeply relaxed state. And that's how I describe self-hypnosis, is at night time, when you're, you know, just about to fall asleep, when you're nice and relaxed, just imagine how it is that you want to be, how it is that you want to feel, um, what it is that you want, rather than focusing on the negative. Really kind of focus on what it is that you want to feel, think, how you want to think, feel, yeah, and, you know, and imagine it as if you're already doing it, seeing it through your own eyes, as if you're already that confident person, or, you know, happy, or a great mother, or free of whatever, you know, that sort of, imagine yourself having left that bad relationship, and free and happy in a new life, and see it, and just imagine how you're going to feel. So really sort of enjoy that moment, really. That's another way as well.
Yeah, I like
And
that.
obviously, yeah.
Yeah, I like that part of imagination, because positive imagery really expand our mind to not just to pay attention to positive things, but also help us to create a future, like a mold into the future, and we are setting and we are working towards that direction. It's just like a positive goal setting, right?
Yeah.
And so I like the part you say that repetition, and it's such a good reminder for me. And sometimes the simplest things that we forget about them, And
Yeah.
this repetition is self-affirmations that we could use to visualize like how the better version of myself, how will it look like? And if
Yeah.
I'm free from of a problem, how will I look like? I could imagine myself being happy, being really engaged with my work or doing something meaningful. Just keep on going there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I like that.
it's quite important to make sure that you don't, when you visualize that, you're actually visualizing and you're looking through your own eyes rather than looking at you from a distance. I mean, you can start by looking at how you look from a distance, but then you need to step inside that visualization and make sure that you actually feel it and see it through your own eyes as if it's really happening right at that moment, so you understand. So and then naturally our unconscious subconscious starts to work towards that, and obviously it's like you said, it's this amazing way of setting a goal, and visualization is key. It's really key for that.
Would you like to share, on that note, would you like to share a quick guide or tip to those who are listening in how could they start their own visualization exercise effectively?
Visualization exercise. Okay, so I would say the best time to do this is at night, just before bed, because it will continue to work, work in the subconscious whilst you're asleep. Is to get completely relaxed, is in bed, lie on your back, and start by working from your toes up to your head. You relax every single part of your body, every single muscle. So you start with your toes. If I do find that sometimes people don't actually know what total relaxation is. So if it's safe to do so, I do say scrunch a little bit, tense up a little bit your muscles. Not if you're going to get cramp, but if it's safe to do so, tense and then relax. Because when you get that feeling of letting go, of relaxing. So once you know what that feeling sensation of letting go is, then you can work through each muscle. You start with your toes and you slowly focus in your mind's eye on relaxing every single muscle. You go up through your shins, your calf muscles. You work very patiently, slowly. Make sure you let go of every tension, all the tension in your body, and you work your way all up to your head. And by this point, you should feel this complete, wonderful, soft, floaty, soft feeling in your muscles. You probably can't even feel, you feel like you're floating on a cloud. And that's the feeling that we want you to get to, to keep relaxing until you get to that point where you feel it's just wonderful, soft and amazing. It's just really enjoy it.
And sometimes
And
by now they have fallen asleep.
well,
Yeah.
hopefully, yeah. Hopefully, you don't fall asleep. But as you're doing it, you want to be. I mean, I would suggest going to bed half an hour before you normally do. Or something,
Okay.
or 20 minutes beforehand to start. I mean, you can do it during the day as well, but I always think it's nice to do it at night when you can just let go, because we're rushing around during the day, and
Mhm.
so usually it's the best time. And then that's when you want to really start just letting your imagination just flow and just think about all those things that like what we were saying before. Really get in the moment of see yourself through your own eyes of exactly what it is, what your goal is, how you want your life to be, um, how you want it to be in the future, but as if it's happening right now, and just enjoy that moment. See yourself in this new career or this new job or with this new business, or see yourself you know being completely social. If you have social anxiety and you want to be more confident, see yourself at a party being the social butterfly and chatting away and feeling great. It's and the important thing is to really sort of see and hear things and make it nice and colorful and bright, turn it up, really sort of crank up those feelings and thoughts and sounds, and just enjoy it. And then naturally you will fall asleep, because that sort of point that we want to get to into the kind of theta brainwave where we, is the most creative, and that is essentially hypnosis, really, state of hypnosis. So that deep relaxation is where change happens, really. So yeah, so
Great.
it's very, very simple, easy to do, and very enjoyable. Really, it's a very pleasant experience. Yeah, I mean, it's something that I use frequently. I do it quite a lot myself, and Yeah, particularly if there's something happening and I need to check, I'm getting my own, because it's an ongoing thing, isn't it? We never reach the best ours, but it's a constant journey. So it's something I practice in my daily life as well. So yeah,
Yeah.
and it's wonderful.
So Lisa, my last question to you would be, what brings you the joy in the work that you do?
What brings me the joy? Just seeing other people, serving other people really, and I think, and just watching people grow and knowing that because everybody has the resources to help themselves. So you're just kind of a guide, really. They're doing all the work, but seeing people go from, perhaps having these limiting beliefs and then being free of them and watching them to go on. I mean, there's no greater joy than that, and there's no more. And it also reminds you of your own journey, and it's very humbling, actually, because there's no greater joy, no greater healing even in helping others heal. So yeah, I mean, there can't be anything better than serving others and helping others.
And so thank you, Lisa, for taking time and your energy, and thank you for sharing all the tips and especially your story of resilience. I think the main takeaway for me today is that we from a story that we are all resilient, and sometimes it takes stories or challenges to expand us so that we could grow. And I really like the part of your advice on repetition, because it comes at the right time for me that there are things that I would like to achieve, and the act of repetition is really important for us to create, to have a good space within ourselves, especially our mind, so that we are not flooded and clouded by negative thoughts. So
Yeah,
repetition is a way to exercise our brain in a good way. Yeah. So
absolutely.
thank you, Lisa. And for those who are listening, please let me know if you have any thoughts or any questions or any ideas after hearing to this episode with Lisa. And thank you for joining me. And thank you, Lisa, for being on the show.
Thank you very much for having me, Stephen. Thank you.
Thank you.